everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Gen Z Fitness Revolution, How Gyms Can Inspire a New Generation. I'm Marianne Murphy, VP here at the Medical Fitness Association. I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce today's presenter. DJ Holman has spent 13 years in the fitness industry after receiving a master's degree in sports science and rehabilitation. Starting as a personal trainer, DJ worked with exercises of various ages and diverse fitness goals, always striving to help them improve their lives through fitness. Moving to Cybex and later Life Fitness, DJ continues the goal of helping people live healthier lives. Using educational courses, DJ works with personal trainers and fitness staff at a variety of facilities to increase their skills, knowledge, and effectiveness. Now, as we move, if you have any questions as we move through today's webinar, you can go ahead and type them in the chat section or the Q&A section of your toolbar. And all questions will be answered in the end in the order they were received. Okay, DJ, take it away.
Thank you very much. And welcome everyone who's on the call. I'll round out my background just a little bit. This is one of my favorite things to do is get to meet new people, get to discuss various topics. And as we were getting set up or trying to pick topics for this presentation, my head was very buried in a bunch of research. As a fitness equipment manufacturer, we spend a lot of time looking at research and trends and things like that because we have to try to think, in some cases, several years ahead of what is happening and try to get in front of trends so that we have time to develop the equipment that will speak to those trends. I don't do a lot of the equipment development personally, but I do talk to those people a lot, and we spend a lot of time looking at research and things like that to help make the most informed decisions. And it's while looking at a lot of this research that I started to notice some very interesting things about this Gen Z population. I've been in the fitness industry for about 13 years. I was in school for 6 years before that, so it goes back a ways. And we're starting to see some sort of new trends that we haven't seen in millennials, and even in older generations. So Gen Z is sort of changing the way that young people approach fitness. And of course, one of my big goals, and the fitness industry as a whole, generally, the goal is to try to get people to have a lifelong habit of health and fitness. So this topic sort of just came to mind as we were discussing it. What we're going to do today is look at a lot of research around the Gen Z population, fitness, health in general, and things like that. And then at the end of it, we want to try to wrap it up with a what does this mean? What can you do with it? How do you take this back and apply it? So that's what we'll do today. And if I can get my slides to advance here. There we go. So always like to start out with a little bit of housekeeping. Normally when I'm doing education days, housekeeping has to do with where is the restroom and where are the drinking fountains. But today, housekeeping is going to have to do with the details. Anytime we're looking at research, I always want to understand how was the research done? What are the details behind that research? What's the methodology? Who are the populations that they were looking at in this research study? Because a lot of times it helps inform what you can or what you cannot take from the research. It's very easy to draw conclusions from research that actually aren't there if you don't pay attention to the methodology. So starting off with some of that, most of the research presented today is going to come from Murphy's research. Murphy Research is a great group that does a huge survey, which I think I have a little bit about in the next slide. But the point of it is it spans the population, and they get a lot of responses. So it's a nice wide look at the population as a whole. Obviously, we're looking at it as it relates to fitness. But in order to cover that and to talk about Gen Z specifically, we first need to define what Gen Z is. So Murphy's research, keeping this in mind as we look at some of the data, they define Gen Z as people born in 1997 up till 2009. I put the other, age groups there, the generations, but Gen Z is the one we're really looking at today. The other one we'll look at a lot is millennials from 1981 to 1996. Gen Z will often get compared to millennials because it's the generation right before it. So the other three definitions that I want to point out here, because it's when you look at some of the actual percentages that are presented today, keep in mind these definitions. So fitness engaged, actually engaged in general for them, means doing this activity once a week or more. So for fitness, that means exercising or engaging in physical activity, wearing a fitness tracker, or using a smartphone app to track physical activity at least once per week. Whether that meets your definition of what you would call fitness engaged or not is up to you. I know certainly I wouldn't consider just logging into a smartphone app to track your steps once a week necessarily fitness engaged, but for the purposes of this research, that's the definition of fitness engaged. Similarly, nutrition engaged is going to revolve around nutrition, logging food intake, taking vitamins or supplements, using a smartphone to track diet, and things like that. And then the last one, mindfulness engaged, this does warrant a little bit of explanation, because the concept of mindfulness is not something that everybody is familiar with. So when they talk about mindfulness engaged, what they're looking at is meditating, using a smartphone app to track mindfulness, practicing yoga to increase mindfulness or gratitude, setting aside time for a gratitude ritual, or journaling, making lists for the purposes of mindfulness or gratitude. So just keep those definitions in mind as we go through. One thing I always like to stress when I say these things, the bar for being considered engaged in any of these three activities is fairly low. Once per week, it's not too hard to meet that bar. So just keep that in mind. Other methodology for Murphy research, the way they do this study, it is an online survey. They send it out to a lot of people. They get about 1,000 responses per month, and this started in July of 2018. So we have good data going back to 2018, but before that, not so much. It takes about 25 minutes to do the survey, and the survey respondents are US teens and adults age 13 and older. So it doesn't go below 13, but it is nice to see that younger group captured in the data. They do work to balance this across the census populations. So they try to get representative samples from, people of different ages, genders, income ranges, regions of the country, as well as different races and ethnicities. Sorry. And it is basically a questionnaire. So people are answering the questions that are posed to them. And often there are multiple answers. So sort of degrees of how do you agree with this? Strongly agree, strongly disagree, that kind of thing. I'm sure you've all taken questions like that. So with all the housekeeping out of the way, let's dive into the information that's maybe a little bit more interesting. Starting with some of the life stage research. Most of Gen Z at this point is actually getting into adulthood, or they are adults. And this is very, very relevant now because they're transitioning from they have mostly transitioned from living with parents and having limited flexibility over their own habit and schedule to now being fully in charge of their own habits, their own spending, their own schedules, and things like that. However, Gen Z, is still pretty young. The top age bracket goes up to about 27. And I don't know about you, but at 27, I was still trying to get my life together. So a lot of these even older Gen Z people are still trying to establish their life habits. They haven't fully gotten there yet. As as a generation, they are in this transition between life stages. But there are already some differences between Gen Z and millennials at the same life stage. So if you kind of go back and look at millennials at the same time, um, a couple things really stand out. Uh, Gen Z compared to millennials less of them tend to have a spouse or a partner. Less of them tend to have children, and more of them tend to either live alone or live with roommates. So more so than millennials, we're seeing Gen Z still being single and not having children. And that actually, to me, is relevant when we start talking about their spending habits. Um, that you can sort of keep that in mind. Being single with no kids, you might have a little bit more money to spend, even if you don't make a lot more. And what we do see that is common across previous generations is the fact that at about 18 years of age, fitness tends to drop off. Health engagement in general, but particularly fitness, tends to drop off as these people get into their adult lives. They start having to work full-time jobs. Life becomes busy, and they have to reestablish their priorities. What you do see, though, is as they continue to age, they are starting to build back into fitness, as well as nutrition and mindfulness. Uh, while Gen Z's health habits are overall similar to millennials, a key difference is that mental health is a big focus. This is going to be a huge focus of the presentation today. Ultimately, I'll sort of give away the punchline already. Gen Z is overall more worried about their health, overall health, which incorporates mental health as well. They're doing fitness because it's a component of mental overall health, not because they know they need to be engaged in fitness for whatever reason. And this, from a personal trainer standpoint or from a fitness facility standpoint, this is fantastic. The fact that they're motivated by overall health and better health outcomes, things like that, as opposed to just checking the box of saying I need to work out 3 to 5 times a week. This is very, very good for them as well as for us. So if you look at some of the responses here, exercising for mindfulness, practicing yoga for mindfulness, higher in Gen Z than millennials, improving mental health is a top priority, higher responses from Gen Z than millennials as well. More engaged with mindfulness overall, you'll see plenty of data to support this later, but especially with tracking. And then eating, but not just eating better, it's eating for the reason of improving mood, energy, sleep, or feeling better. Higher responses from Gen Z than millennials. So this is sort of one of the big takeaways of the whole presentation is they are engaging in fitness, they are engaging in nutrition, they are engaging in mindfulness, but overall, they're driving at this goal of better overall health. And all of those things are just a component of that. So Gen Z are mostly adults now. I like to sum up all of my major sections with key takeaways. Since it is a lot of data, hopefully you can at least remember the key takeaways. They're mostly adults now and in charge of their own habits and spending. Gen Z are more engaged with health overall than millennials were at the same age. So a couple important things to keep in mind as we go forward through the rest of the research. So then fitness, looking specifically at fitness in Gen Z, they are more focused on how they want to feel. They're also more willing to spend money on generally experiences that make them feel good. And this relates to fitness as well. They are more likely to use gyms than millennials were, especially in the older Gen Z population. We see a nice uptick. The yellow arrow here means compared to millennials. So this isn't necessarily comparing to other Gen Z, it's comparing directly to millennials at that same age. Gen Z much more likely to be involved in a gym or have a gym membership. And the other big one here, their spend on fitness apparel is higher, which this is a big theme for me from this. Gen Z are willing to invest in health and in fitness because I assume, because research doesn't really answer this question, but they find it very important. They know it's an important component of their life and they're willing to invest in this. But also keep in mind that the being single and having no kids, or more of them being single and less of them having kids, is also a factor in this. They may just have more disposable income as well. Um, One of the big goals of fitness has always been to try to build lifelong fitness habits in people. And really, the only way that you can do that is for people to enjoy working out, or at least enjoy the results they get from working out. And in, I'll say, recent years, it's been a decade or two at this point, but we know that exercise is great for uh, mental health, for stress. It has many emotional benefits. And Gen Z is focusing on these things. Just like they are with nutrition, with fitness, they're focusing on those, what I'll call, second level benefits of exercise. So it's not necessarily the lose weight, the be more muscular looking or look better, whatever those are kind of first level benefits of exercise. They're looking at that sort of next level, the emotional benefits, the stress benefits. Um, High responses of looking forward to working out. Um, Exercising relieves stress and improves mood. Very high response there. And then relying on mood to assess health goals. So the awareness around mental health is really taking root in this Gen Z population. And then this one really hits home with me. Over 50% saying having fun is the primary goal of exercise. So where in the past losing weight was usually the number one listed goal for exercising, Gen Z is wanting to have fun with what they are doing. Where do they work out? This is a big one that always comes up. Um, Gyms, as we said before, with Gen Z, especially the older portion of Gen Z, they are working out more in gyms than their millennial counterparts were at the same time. So they are willing to put the money towards a gym membership, again, if they feel like they're getting the value there. It is important to them. They're willing to spend, but they have to be able to see the value in it. But I also wanted to point out these other two categories here, and obviously you can look at the numbers, they're not mutually exclusive, but home and outside, very high numbers here. So uh, it's not an either or thing. This is another thing we've seen from a lot of other research across the board, not just with Gen Z, but especially with Gen Z and millennials. They are working out in multiple locations throughout the week. So they will work out at home, they will work out outside, but they are also going to the gym and participating in online classes. So it's a combination of all of these things. And then at the point that I've already kind of hit on several times, they're willing to spend on fitness, um, whether sneakers, gym memberships, things like that. The spend from especially older Gen Z uh, exercisers, they are significantly more willing to spend than millennials were at the same age. So um, worth keeping this in mind. The sort of barrier of cost is much less a factor with this generation, as long as they think it's beneficial to that goal of better health overall. And they do spend quite a bit on fitness. This was one that really stuck out to me, working with a lot of gyms. Obviously, as an equipment manufacturer, that's what we spend most of our time working with is gyms. So Gen Z, and this is in this case, the lighter color is the older portion of Gen Z, they are spending significantly more than their younger counterparts, but they're also spending more than millennials were at the same point uh, on just gym and fitness studio memberships. So boutiques kind of exploded, have since, I won't say gone down in popularity, but they're not the buzzword that they used to be anymore. However, when you drive through town, you'll still see boutique chains everywhere. um, a lot of gyms are worried that boutiques are stealing customers, but what we're actually seeing is a lot of customers having a membership to a sort of traditional gym and also spending on a membership at a boutique studio. And I think this number is reflective of that. Gen Z are willing to go out and have one, two, sometimes even three memberships, an online membership, in order to engage with that fitness. Right? And then, of course, the apparel spending as well is higher in the older Gen Z population, but also significantly higher than millennials. And then over here, annual fitness spend for the older Gen Z population, over $300 annually. So switching it up a little bit and starting to look at motivations. This is, as I've looked at data from 2018 on for the entire population spectrum, so not just Gen Z. One thing I noticed was a trend away from those first level exercise benefits towards second level exercise benefits. So less focus on weight, less focus on appearance, and more focus on feeling better, um, preventing future health issues, things like that. So, which is a great trend for the fitness industry. That's what we want to see, because those are reasons that people can grasp onto that will keep them coming back, engaged in fitness, and turning it into a lifelong habit. Coming to the gym to check the box, just to say I've been to the gym 5 times this week, that's not something that will generally keep people motivated in the long term. So, looking at some of the barriers that were stated, especially with Gen Z, the biggest barriers are lack of motivation and lack of energy. Lack of time, of course, is a big one. Lack of time has always been a big barrier for people, but it comes in third to lack of motivation and lack of energy. And actually, what you don't really see on this list is money. The cost barrier just it doesn't even show up on this particular list. Some other important ones I want to point out though for later in our discussion, lack of confidence, pretty high, especially in the younger Gen Z population, but even in the older Gen Z population, 23% of respondents said that lack of confidence was a barrier for them. Lack of progress, lack of knowledge, and lack of support. All four of these, to me, speak to facilities. Um, in the information age that we live in, you can go anywhere to find information. The internet's full of it. Actually, the challenge now is not information access, it's filtering through the information overload to try to find good information that is useful. And that's challenging. It takes time. It does take actually a little bit of skill and knowledge in order to be able to filter through that information. And this is where facilities can be really helpful, because if someone's coming into a facility that's staffed with fitness professionals, they expect those fitness professionals to be able to sort of filter through some of that information. The information that comes from that fitness professional, they expect to be good, reliable information. And that stuff can all speak to these four categories: helping boost people's confidence as they exercise, help making sure that they see progress when they exercise through good program design, helping educate them on why they're doing what they're doing, and then of course the support of just having someone there to change up your program if you need to, or just encourage you when you're feeling a little down. So the barriers have been changing. But interestingly, compared to millennials, lack of energy, although it's the second listed reason, was significantly lower in Gen Z than it was in millennials at the same age. So, you can take from that what you will. Gen Z is finding the energy to engage with fitness more so than millennials were. Some of the barriers that did actually increase, though, in the Gen Z population: family demands, career, social obligations. So these three big ones, as Gen Z ages, that's what we would expect to see. Family, career, and social obligations start to sort of grab hold of people's lives. So to be expected there. So my key takeaways from this portion of the presentation: Gen Z enjoy exercise and they are emotionally connected to fitness. And I don't think I can overstate this enough. This emotional connection to their fitness journey is super important, and it gives all exercise professionals who want to work with Gen Z a really good way to get a foot in the door. If we can show them that we can provide value, whether it's a facility or a personal trainer or a group instructor, whatever it might be, if we can show them that we can provide value and help them meet their health and fitness goals, they are willing to listen. They are willing to spend money on those things. Key takeaway number 2, Gen Z are willing to spend that money on health and fitness. And then key takeaway number 3, and this, you could star this one, you could bold it. This is sort of the big one for the overall presentation. Gen Z view fitness as a means to an end. The ultimate goal is better overall health, and fitness is just one of the components to that. And this is actually a really good thing. So that brings us into this discussion of mindfulness, because mindfulness, to me at least, is a relatively new concept. In recent years, especially since the COVID times, this increased focus on mental health has sort of permeated all portions of our lives. And again, looking at, fitness and people's overall health, this is a very, very good thing. And I think Gen Z embodies this concept. So let's dive a little bit into what is mindfulness and then how we can see this driving the behavior of Gen Z. Mindfulness has become more mainstream over the years. 1 in 2 Americans are engaging in some form of weekly mindfulness practice. So you can look at sort of mindfulness engaged, again, remembering that definition, the barrier for entry is fairly low, but you can see from 2019 to 2024, the steady increase in people who are engaged with mindfulness. So this could include things like apps that help you engage more with your state of mind, with your stress levels, et cetera, movement and exercise for the purposes of like stress management or feeling better, meditation and prayer, self-reflecting and journaling, as well as gratitude rituals. So it's kind of anything in that category falls into mindfulness. And again, I think years ago, we would have loosely termed this like spiritual health. So you kind of had physical health, we have mental health, and now we have sort of spiritual health. Now we don't really term it spiritual health anymore. It's more of a component of someone's mental health. While mindfulness is a trend across all age groups, we see the most dramatic change across women in Gen Z. So you see these increases from 2019 total Gen Z, you've seen a 14-point increase, but in the female Gen Z population, you've seen an 18-point increase. Looking at millennials, you see a pretty good 10-point increase as well, but the increases across millennials, Gen X, and boomers are about the same. Gen Z is the generation who really seems to be taking mindfulness on board and using it as sort of a center point of their lives. The interest in mindfulness continues to come from those already engaged with their health. I found this stat to be quite interesting. So we see that about 50% of the US population is engaged in some sort of mindfulness activity at least once per week. But when you start to look at fitness engaged, or you start to look at those people who are mindfulness engaged, sorry, only 4% of those mindfulness engaged people were only engaged in mindfulness activities. 96% of them were also engaged in either nutrition or fitness or both. And you can sort of see from the pie chart here, a relatively small percentage were engaged in mindfulness and fitness. A slightly larger percentage were engaged in mindfulness and nutrition, but by far the largest portion of those were engaged with all three: mindfulness, fitness, and nutrition. And again, I'll tie this back to my key takeaways. People are starting to look at health more holistically. Fitness is not the goal anymore. It is a tool. It is a stepping point, a way to get to the goal, which is overall better health, encompassing physical as well as mental health. Stress reduction is one of the big focuses of consumers' mindfulness benefits. So why are people engaging in mindfulness? A lot of it comes down to mental health and stress, right? This probably isn't surprising to anyone. If something was going to encourage you to get involved with mindfulness activities, gratitude journaling or yoga or breathing exercises, stress is probably a big component of that. So 71% of those people who were mindfulness engaged were doing so for mental health / stress reasons, whether it was reducing stress and anxiety, improving their overall mental health, or improving sleep. That encompassed 71% of people. A whopping 50% of people, though, did say to feel better, just sort of a general feel better, which is something that I like to see. Enhancing positive emotions, also fairly high. So those sort of get lumped into this category of positivity. But so the benefit to that is we're starting to recognize our mental state and actively do something about it, whether that is actively try to reduce our stress or actively try to increase our positive emotions. Both, I think we could agree, are very good things. A good portion of people, though, were engaged with mindfulness for the purpose of increasing their focus. I know this helps a lot with me for work. If I really need to get some stuff done, it's very beneficial for me to sort of sit down, take a minute or two before I even start, and sort of center myself and focus on what I'm going to do and block out a lot of other distractions. Or maybe I sort of create an environment that's conducive to work with maybe a little bit of white noise or something. These are all things that people are engaging with to help increase that focus as well. Interestingly, many consumers are coming to the mindfulness activity spectrum on the advice of healthcare professionals. And I wanted to really put this in here so that it can tie into some of the takeaways from later in the presentation. How can medical professionals, how can fitness centers associated with healthcare organizations help influence or help drive some of this Gen Z behavior? This is one of the ways. Continued focus on mindfulness and mental health. 42% of respondents said that the source of that influence came from their doctor, which is great. A mental health professional, this I would sort of expect to see, but a physician being very high up there is excellent as well. And then other medical professional also encompass 37%. So professionally, from a professional medical standpoint, people are getting influenced or sort of pushed to engage in mindfulness activities, to put more importance on their mental health. How does mindfulness influence health habits, though? Because if we look back in the past, yoga and what we would loosely term mindfulness activities now have been around for a while. It's not actually new when you get right down to it. But the sort of connection that we're seeing is something that's new. So how is it all connecting together? Well, while mindfulness is most closely connected to mental and emotional health, consumers also tie it to their physical health and particularly their fitness journey. And this is much more pronounced among younger consumers, so Gen Z and millennials, than it is against older consumers. So the connection, the number of people who responded that they believe there is a connection between mindfulness and these other activities or these other areas of life, 72% of course said mental and emotional health, as you would expect, but 55% also said fitness and 51% said diet and nutrition. So mindfulness is viewed as this thing. I call it kind of like a triangle, right? Where you have physical health, mental health, and then this mindfulness, where it's playing with all these other factors as well. 68% of people said that mindfulness helps them stay motivated to meet their other health goals. And that sort of makes sense if you think about why people engage in mindfulness in the first place, to reduce stress or to increase feelings of positivity. If you can reduce your stress or increase your positive feelings, you are much more likely to stay motivated to meet your goals. So this is maybe not surprising, but the other thing that it points out to me is people are looking at mindfulness as a way to enhance what they're doing in other areas of their lives. And this, as stated before, was higher among Gen Z and millennials. Mindfulness has approached how I change fitness. 57% responded positively to that. And then also similarly, nutrition, 56% responded positively to that. If I can just use nutrition as an example in this case, diets have been a big thing, and as an industry, we have known that a lot of times diets don't work. Even if they do achieve some weight loss results, people tend to put the weight back on pretty quickly afterwards. And if you look at people's view of diets, it's pretty negative. They the view of the diet itself, their emotions around dieting are fairly negative. They're doing it because they want to lose weight or they want to look better or something like that. So the goal is somewhat positive, but the actual process is viewed very negatively. With practices in the mindfulness realm, especially positive emotions and things like that, you can start to change how you approach this whole concept of diet. And I would throw diet out the window and say just nutrition in general and healthy eating habits. It's not exercising to lose weight because you have to jump on a scale. It's engaging in healthy fitness activities for the long term, right? Turning them into lifestyle habits. And that's true in both fitness and nutrition. Because mindfulness is growing among those who are already engaged with health in general, two highly looking at two highly engaged groups, we want to understand how the addition of mindfulness impacts fitness and nutrition, because these are already people who are generally engaged with fitness, who are already engaged with nutrition anyway. Looking at the biggest outcome of this was people who are engaged in mindfulness, fitness, and nutrition are much more likely to be Gen Z and millennials, Hispanic or Black African American, or parents with children in the home. So I found that quite interesting. People who are only dual engaged, meaning only engaged with fitness and nutrition, more likely to be boomers, more likely to be white, married or living alone, and have no children at home. So you see this sort of shift in who is more likely to be engaged with these things. But we also see an overall growing trend. People who are engaged with fitness and nutrition only has stayed pretty steady since 2019. 24% then, 23% now. Not really a drastic change. But the percentage of people who are engaged with all three has been steadily increasing over time. And obviously, since the only component of that changed is mindfulness, a lot of this is coming from that mindfulness spectrum. Consumers who layer mindfulness onto fitness and nutrition are more physically active and they're more involved with their nutrition than if you compare them to people who are dual engaged. So these are, again, I want to make it clear, we're not comparing here people who are engaged with mindfulness, fitness, and nutrition to people who are not engaged with any of them. We're comparing them directly with people who are already engaged with fitness and nutrition. They're just not engaged with mindfulness. And what we see is a significant increase in daily exercise for those people who are engaged with all three. A huge increase in gym memberships in those people who are engaged with mindfulness. Food logging and following a diet. I wish I would change some of these terms from following a diet to like following a nutrition plan, because I think that's a much more positive way in people's mind of putting it. But what you see still here is huge increases. I mean, 10 to 20 percentage point difference because they are triple engaged instead of just engaged with fitness and nutrition. So it does make a big difference. They're also more emotionally invested in their health habits. And despite feeling more stressed, they're more likely to actively manage it. Two things I took away from this, looking at this wasn't just all the data I looked at, there was a lot, but mindfulness consumers recognize that they are stressed and they're feeling overwhelmed. And that's often what leads them back or holds them back, sorry, from their fitness goals and nutrition goals. So they're recognizing that that's one of their big barriers. And then by building that awareness and self-reflecting, mindfulness helps those people who are engaged with it recognize that when they are not prioritizing fitness and diet, both mental health and physical health will suffer. So with the goal of better overall health, you can sort of see how an increase in mindfulness, an increase in the awareness of stress, the awareness that stress is holding them back from fitness and nutrition goals, and again, the awareness that that's going to detrimentally affect their mental and physical health. You can sort of see why mindfulness is becoming very, very popular. Okay. Even compared to those who are engaged with both fitness and nutrition, adding mindfulness is related to greater openness to experimentation. This is a big thing for me. I think the willingness to be open-minded is very important. And what we see is people who are engaged with mindfulness are more willing to experiment with things. And it's not just things you might think, it's experimenting with kind of everything, different eating philosophies, different workout routines, all these sort of different things. They're also much more likely to engage with fitness. Exercise and mindfulness have similar benefits. They sort of work in tandem to increase the benefits that you would see from just one or the other by itself. So these two tend to be, or they're starting to be especially, much more connected. One way that we sort of see this in practice is to sort of set it up, reset and center, and then let it go philosophy. Where set it up is sort of preparing yourself to have positive emotions, to have a good day, that kind of thing. So morning exercise, setting up the day well, or waking up with some stretching, or it might even be waking up and doing some gratitude journaling or something like that. Reset and recenter. This is often that time where you are feeling stressed, you're feeling overwhelmed, and you use mindfulness exercises and or fitness to help bring you back to a more normal state. And then let it go. We all know that exercise is a great stress reliever. And adding mindfulness on top of that helps us, number one, recognize when we're very stressed, but it also helps us feel the benefits of our exercise more, if that sort of makes sense. And then it helps us prepare for things like bed, winding down and getting ready for bed so that we can get a good night of sleep, which is also quite important in the whole discussion. I'm going to skip to this slide. So key takeaways from this section. And number one, mindfulness increases fitness and nutrition engagement overall. So if people are engaged with mindfulness, they're much more likely to be engaged with these other things as well. Those who engage in mindfulness tend to view health more holistically. And because of this, they're much more devoted to it. So they're much more likely to stick with nutrition plans, fitness plans, and things like that. The oldest members of Gen Z are still solidifying their health and fitness habits, which leaves room to harness their spending potential. I shouldn't have termed it this way. Now that I read it, it sounds so like evil genius kind of thing. But the reality is they are still shaping their life habits. And while they're at this stage, we have an important opportunity to help shape where they dedicate their time, their money, and things like that. And we all, I think, would know and agree that overall health and fitness being a big part of that are very, very good ways to spend some of your time and your money. So this is a sort of big takeaway from a facility standpoint. And finally, I'll reiterate this one. Gen Z view fitness as a means to an end. This is something that is still hard for me, being a millennial, to get my head around fully, because I still view fitness as more of a check the box kind of thing. I know I need to do it because it's good for me, but my goal is to go to the gym and work out. Whereas what we're seeing from Gen Z is their goal isn't to go to the gym and work out. Their goal is to live better, to live healthier. And working out or eating well or things like that are just a means to an end. So what does this mean for gyms? I'm also, at this point, I'm transitioning a little bit from Murphy research to what I see and what Life Fitness as a company has seen in a lot of our interactions with gyms and exercisers. Number one, Gen Z are more health engaged at younger ages than previous generations. We've seen that. This is great because what has always happened in the past, people drop off in their health and fitness engagement, and then they tend to stay pretty low until they get to be middle aged and health starts to become a bigger factor and a little scarier. And then all of a sudden, the need to get back into health and fitness is really important. We all know, though, it's not too late to do it, but you would have gotten much more benefit had you just stayed engaged with health and fitness through your 20s and 30s instead of dropping off and trying to re-engage in your 40s. At that point, it's harder to build muscle. You're trying to sort of undo some of the damage you've done to your body or lessen its impact on your body at that point. So the more we can get people engaged from a younger age and keep them engaged as they start their adult lives, the better off they're going to be as they age. So this is very, very important to me. Gen Z, they're already connecting fitness with overall health. I think I've hit that point enough, so I'll just move on. By engaging with fitness centers associated with healthcare organizations, we can further connect fitness with overall health. As a fitness industry, I think we separate ourselves way too much from the healthcare industry, when in reality, fitness is just a component of someone's overall health. They really should be much more tied together. How do we appeal to some of those Gen Z audiences? I think connecting their fitness program, their nutrition program, really anything that they're doing with their overall health goals, which also means number one, we need to understand what their overall health goals are. We need to get to know them and understand what it is they want to accomplish, and then connect what they're doing back to that. How is this class, this exercise program going to help me meet those goals? It's the so what, who cares? That's what I term it. I'm going to get t-shirts made up to say so what, who cares? Because that's like, that's a catchphrase I use quite often. Ultimately, whatever you're telling me or whatever I'm telling you, you're thinking, why do I care about this? How does it impact my life? That's what we need to drive home. We need to make that very apparent in marketing materials, in the conversations that we have, the way we promote our trainers, our businesses, all that kind of stuff. We need to drive back to how does this improve my life? The other thing that I'm pulling from outside of the fitness industry is that personalization is becoming expected. Not becoming, it is expected in almost every other aspect of life, especially young people. They expect the ability to personalize the experience that they're having, whether that's on their phone or, I mean, even food. 20 years ago, it was sort of taboo to go to a restaurant and order food and then ask them to leave certain things off of it. You sort of got it how it was on the menu, right? Nowadays, if restaurants won't customize a menu item to your liking, people are, they're very unhappy about that. It's become the expected norm. How can we bring that to the fitness experience? That was one big question. And I'll be honest, I don't fully have an answer to that one, but this is a big thinking point. How can we start to personalize the fitness experience? And then one caution before we leave this slide. We see this in some gyms, and then in other gyms, we see different populations. And I think as we look at sort of medical fitness centers or fitness centers that are associated with healthcare organizations in general, one caution is that we need to make sure we have enough young people in the gym. Because if I go into a gym, this does happen to me occasionally because of my work schedule. I'll go into a gym and I'll be the only person under 50 years old in the gym that day. It's not very motivational to me. I like to see other people who are around my age, right? I like to sort of fit in. So that's a caution that I'll say. We need to figure out how to do that as a whole, bring in decent populations of young people into our facilities. And then from our perspective, from the Life Fitness, trying to add a little bit into this discussion, what have we seen in recent years? Number one, strength is a focus. The growing trend in strength training is very real. It's not that people are not doing cardio, though. Cardio is still very important. It's just that people have realized how important strength is to independence in later years, and also just your ability to do anything at any point in life. Of the strength, lower body strength is where people are tending to focus, especially females. That leg strength and especially glute strength are hugely important. One thing from a gym perspective that's important to keep in mind, if you think back to the slide where I showed where is Gen Z exercising, huge portions of people exercising at home and outside. I would wager a good amount of money that what they're doing outside is cardio, some form of cardio activity, because you can do forms of cardio basically anywhere. There's very low barriers to entry for that. A set of running shoes is, you're good to go. Strength is a different story. And this is where gyms can really provide value to people. Yes, you need to have cardio, but a variety of strength equipment is how you can provide something to exercisers that they can't get in their home. So I think that that's something that's really driving a trend that we have seen to dedicate less floor space to cardio and more floor space to strength training. It's not that cardio is less important. It's just that people have other options when it comes to cardio. And personalization is important. And this is not a plug for our product. I just want to show an example. We are starting to take personalization in cardio seriously. So as an example, our newest line of equipment, people have the ability on the treadmill to actually adjust the stiffness of the deck. So if they want to walk or run on a softer surface, they can do that. If they want to walk or run on a firmer surface, they can do that. If they want to set certain quick speeds to certain levels, they have the ability as an exerciser to do that. So personalization is starting to come into the fitness world. And I think as an industry, we need to start to think, how can we expand that and how can we build on that even more? Motivation is still a key barrier. Working out alone, outside or at home, is not nearly as motivational as working out at a gym with other people. Even if you put your headphones on and you don't ever talk to anyone else, just being around other people is a motivation factor in itself. And this is another area facilities can benefit exercisers. It's just in that motivation factor. Having people there who are working out with you, who care about your fitness journey, is highly motivational. So before I end, last thing, take away, you don't have to do this now because it'll take time, but as you walk away from this or as you revisit this later, if you operate a fitness center, what could you do to be more attractive to those younger exercisers? If you don't operate a fitness center, or even if you do, what could you do? What could we do as an industry to help drive exercise retention and health related retention in younger generations to keep this focus on health and wellness as they age instead of sort of losing it for a 20-year period like we generally see? And that's it. I went a little longer than I wanted to, and I didn't leave as much time for Q&A, but yes.
Oh, here we are. No, that was great. I thought it was really interesting with, with this Gen Z, they were so much younger during the pandemic when mental health was such a focus because so many people did have such difficulties with that. And
Yep.
so it's interesting that they've come into adulthood with that mindset of, I've got to do something for my mental health.
Yes.
Amazing. Great, great data there. Thank you. I mean, if I was marketing for a fitness center, I would definitely hone in. There's so many studies on the mental health benefits of exercise. And
Yep.
that's obviously what's going to resonate with that younger group. Got a couple of thank yous, some comments in the webinar chat if you guys want to take a look at those. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them either in the Q&A or the chat panel. More thank yous. This was great research to share, and just I have no connection to Murphy research. That's not my family.
Yes. Yes. I was
But
thinking that as we were setting this up, it was kind of funny to me that we were using Murphy research and I was working with you, but obviously
right.
completely separate.
Yeah, full disclosure, that is not my family. There's a lot of Murphys out there.
Yes.
But I just want to thank you so much, DJ, for sharing your knowledge with us today and all of that research while we're waiting to see if some questions come in. All attendees will receive an email with a speaker evaluation for today's webinar, and it includes a spot to indicate which CEC you would like to receive. So be sure to complete the survey. And even if you're not looking for a CEC, go ahead and complete the survey, because this feedback helps us in planning future webinars. It helps presenters with their presentation skills. I will let you know that our next webinar is scheduled for next Thursday, October 24th. It is entitled Gut Immune Brain, Pyramids of Health. And that's with Dr. Lori Gerber. She is a doctor of osteopathic medicine at Dr. Lori LLC. And we have many more webinars coming up. They're all on the MFA website under the Education tab with the links to register, and that's at medicalfitness.org. Yeah, it's interesting. Terry was writing, certainly women with young children and running households and working, their priorities change and they have very little time for themselves. So again, just kind of bringing that point home for that group, as they're moving into having children, the importance for their mental health to make that little bit of time. And just
Yep.
how little bit of time, like people, I think, tend to think, oh, I've got to spend hours in the gym. No, you
Yep.
don't. Not unless you're an
Totally.
elite athlete, maybe. But it doesn't take that much time. So I think, kind of sometimes driving that point home. Also, just a reminder for everyone, don't forget we have our biggest event of the year coming up, the MFA Annual Conference. That's next month on November 19 to 21, with a ton of education and networking, all in sunny New Orleans. So visit the events section of the MFA website, again, at medicalfitness.org, and you can register today. I'm not seeing any further questions. Other than thank you. Jonathan was saying, I know we use yoga and other group exercise classes, but what other activities do you think as a gym we can promote this mindfulness, like other than yoga?
Yeah. So yoga it's been one of the classic sort of examples of mindfulness exercises. And of course I still utilize it. But one thing that helps ingrain this in people's daily lives is to make it simpler. So even though I know you're thinking gyms, what can we do? What kind of classes can we set up? What kind of stuff can we do? It's even smaller than that, but also more expansive. So incorporating mindfulness activities into all of your classes. So just taking some time to practice relaxed breathing, or trying to use breathing to help control heart rate during certain portions of exercise. Maybe everybody's coming into a group exercise class. Maybe we just take that first few minutes to bring our stress and anxiety levels down before we start. Or maybe you do it at the end because you've worked out a lot of stress during the workout and you want to leave on a very positive note. So we focus on some positivity feelings at the end. Even things that people can do at home, and I think gyms can encourage these. So I do it with my children, and I try to do it personally, although I'll admit I don't do it all the time, is gratitude journaling. Just writing down things that you're thankful for helps change your outlook on even a daily basis so much. So a very simple thing gyms could do maybe as a marketing thing is just providing a gratitude journal to people that has the logo of your facility on it, for instance. Very, very simple things, but getting it ingrained in people's daily lives, to me, is how this becomes most effective. So incorporate it in all of your classes: breathing exercises, stress reduction, positivity feelings, and things like that. And then also for me, gratitude has just been a huge part.
That's awesome. Yeah, Terry's saying love the gratitude part. And it is a big part of that. What are you thankful for today? Sometimes in our crazy lives, we completely miss that whole part. And it does, it just brings your happiness ratio up.
Yeah, we do something at dinner. We say, what do we call it? Favorite, worst, and kindness. So we go around our dinner table and we say what's a favorite part of our day, which is essentially a gratitude thing. Worst part of our day, so an opportunity to sort of share, what you struggled with that day. And then what we did that was kind for someone else, or another kindness that we saw. So I mean that's more in our family situation than in a
Mhm.
gym, obviously, but just incorporating those little habits. And you could do that in a gym setting as well. You can
Well, yeah,
incorporate some of those
actually,
things.
Reba Mason just put up that they put up a gratitude walls from time to time.
Yes.
Put out sticky notes and let people write what they're thankful for and then post them on their wall. I love that idea because even if you don't write something, sometimes just walking past that,
Yeah.
and there might be somebody else's post it that really resonates with you. It's like, wow, you know what? I never even thought of that.
Yeah, and progress as well. I mean, sharing progress that people have made in your facility, sort of I don't want to call it a brag board because that kind of has a negative connotation, but sharing
Yeah.
some of those success stories so people can see them. That's motivational as well, and it is a form of mindfulness because you're trying to focus on the positivity of what you've accomplished.
Yeah. Oh, I love that idea. I need a
Yes,
gratitude
these are
wall in
very good
my office
ideas.
somewhere. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, well, I'm not seeing any more, but certainly plenty of thank yous. This has been great. So thank you, all of us, everybody, for joining us today. And certainly thank you to DJ Homan for sharing his knowledge with us. His email address is right there. I will be sending out a PDF of the presentation slide deck afterwards. So you will have his contact information if you think of any other questions later, as usually is the case. But more thank yous coming through, and I'll leave it here and just say enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.